Hi everyone, I'm Annalisa from C.A.C. Global Solutions. We're aircraft management specialists, and today I'd like to present you with another Civil Aviation Authority interview. Brad Peters and I had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Thomas Dunstan, Director General of the Bermuda Civil Aviation Authority. We discussed the history of the authority, the structure, the regulation, and the different aspects and pieces that have to be in place to manage a Bermuda registered aircraft under a flight operations, airworthiness, and maintenance perspective. We talked about transition aircraft, storage aircraft, and commercial AOCs, as the registry also supports this kind of projects and operations. The intent with this interview is to share knowledge about the regulation, the approach, and the services provided by the Bermuda Civil Aviation Authority. We'd like to thank Mr. Thomas Dunstan and all the people of the Bermuda Aircraft Registry that made this interview possible. We're grateful for the opportunity to have had this conversation, and we're sure you're all going to enjoy the content and the information shared in this interview. Enjoy, and thanks for watching. Hi everyone, it's Annalisa and Brett from C.A.C. Global Solutions. We are here today with a very special guest. His name is Thomas Dunstan, and he's the Director General of the Bermuda Civil Aviation Authority. Thomas, welcome, and thank you so much for your time and for meeting with us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, perfect. So I would like to start with you. If you can tell a few words about yourself, your background, and how you started with the Bermuda Authority.
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's a little scary because I was thinking about this the other day, and I think I've been in aviation almost 40 years. Getting up there. Um, so I've always dreamed of being a pilot. That was what I wanted to be when I was growing up. And I did that. I became a pilot, got my licenses and all that. Unfortunately, when I finished my training, I wasn't able to find work because first Gulf War had started back then. Anyway, so I did a little bit of work in other sectors, other industries, got back into aviation, and then eventually I joined the Bermuda airport and worked in various positions within the airport here in Bermuda. Did that for 10 years, and then I moved on to the regulator. I became the director of civil aviation in 2006. So I've been with the regulator 18 years now, and at that time we were a government department, and we transitioned, which we'll talk a bit more about. We transitioned to what's called a Quango, which is a quasi-autonomous, non-governmental organization, in 2016. So that's just a snapshot of my background. I've been in aviation for just about all my life. It's my passion.
Do you still fly?
I don't. I certainly miss it as a hobby, but I have had the opportunity to do a little flight around Bermuda, sightseeing tour around Bermuda, which has been fantastic. And yeah, you never lose that bug, I don't think.
No, I'm still waiting. Okay.
So, can you talk a little bit about the history of the authority? When was it established?
So the Civil Aviation, well, it wasn't an authority back then, but it was a government department. So it actually formed back in 1931. So it's been around a long, long time. And as I say, it was a government department. It was handling the regulatory aspects of aviation here in Bermuda. They also were responsible for running the airport at that time, or at least the civil terminal, because the airport, the airfield, was actually a military airfield, which was built by the U.S. Navy way back. Um, Anyway, that became a civil airport later on, and I think it was 1995-ish or so. And at that point, the Civil Aviation Department was separated from the airdrome operator. So they became just the regulator of aviation at that point. And we then transitioned to an authority in 2016. So the government made the decision that, the regulator needed to be standing on its own, and while still a part of government, it's at arm's length from government. So we actually have a board of directors that I answer to, but our one and only shareholder, I guess you could say, of the authority is the Bermuda government at the end of the day.
Okay.
Okay. So is it considered a private enterprise then?
No, it's not a private enterprise. It's a government authority, basically. So whilst we're self-financed, we still have to report financially to the government. And we actually, if there's any surplus at the end of our financial year, that surplus goes back to the government of Bermuda, to the government coffers.
Mhm.
So when the authority was, and excuse me if I get my timeline or my sequence of events slightly off, but when before the authority became an entity on its own, did it regulate only Bermudan aircraft in the Bermuda area, or was it? Did you still entertain offshore aircraft at that time?
We were doing offshore aircraft during that period as well. In fact, we had a number of aircraft that were registered here in Bermuda that operated in other countries, such as Russia and Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan at that time. And these were done through bilateral agreements between the countries. So, and I'll talk a bit more about those agreements as we get into the services and stuff as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, under a practical point of view, if you have to amend the regulation, how does it work for you? Do you have to go through the government?
Right. So we, from the aviation perspective, our regulations, legislation all comes from the UK. So we are an overseas territory of the United Kingdom, and therefore the United Kingdom is the signatory state to ICAO. We're not a direct signatory, but we are through the UK. And then, so the UK has their civil aviation order. We then have an air navigation overseas territory order. That's a mouthful. ANOTO, or order for short. And that is our primary legislation. So that comes directly from the UK. And then we have our set of requirements, which are the Overseas Territories Aviation Requirements, OTARs, and these apply to all of the UK overseas territories. So those are our regulations. So when those are amended, they are amended by our regulators in the UK, and our direct regulator in the UK is Air Safety Support International, ASSI, which is a sister company of the UK CAA. It is directly responsible to the UK DFT, who they oversee us and do regular assessments on our oversight to make sure that we are in compliance with ICAO at all times, which of course is the mandate for the UK.
I'm curious though. I mean, if the if Bermuda feels that the changes are necessary to the OTARs or the order, what's uh, what input do they have to to affect those changes?
So we have direct input into those. There could be, so there's two ways. One is there are changes that come from ICAO, obviously, and then those are filtered down through the legislation and the requirements, and we get consulted on all of those changes. And the other is we can suggest or recommend changes that need to be made, and that goes through ASSI for any amendments that have to take place. The great thing with the way it's set up is we don't have to change the primary legislation very often. So the order itself, because it's quite broad in general. The OTARs are where the details of requirements are, and they're basically our means of compliance to the order, and those can be done at the ASSI level. So as long as the overseas territories agree, then the changes can be made with the requirements themselves. So it's
Okay.
actually quite a good system that's been set up, so that we can be responsive if changes need to be made fairly quickly.
Right, right. But the any changes that would be made to the OTARs would be applicable to all of the territories, though.
That's correct.
Okay, but the interpretation of those or the implementation of those could have their own. Each authority could have their own nuances on how they perceive or employ those requirements. Is that right?
Uh, yes, potentially. So what we do is twice a year, the overseas territories get together with ASSI. So we have an overseas territory group that gets together, and we discuss any challenges or changes or anything that we're having issues with. So we have that opportunity to, as a group, discuss these things, because occasionally you find that you're interpreting something maybe slightly different from another OT. Um, so through ASSI, they have legal representation and all that can help us with the interpretation if we need it. It hasn't. I mean, it hasn't really been much of an issue at all. I mean, the way the OTRs are written, they're pretty clear, um, and we can get clarification on any points that anybody raises, and very very quickly.
Yeah,
Interesting.
perfect. Yeah. So about the authority, what's the current structure? How many people work for the authority, departments?
So we're currently 27 full-time employees, and we have a number of contracted workers and inspectors as well. So it's a good balance between full-time as well as part-time contractors. And the nice thing is contractors are basically based worldwide, um, which is really, really useful for us when we're doing inspections, or we need to do audits, because we can get to our customers and clients very quickly, um, and efficiently. So it's not a huge cost. We're not sending people from Bermuda all the time to go halfway across the world, which can be very costly, of course. So we can get to people very quickly and at a reasonable cost as well.
I think time sensitivity is a big thing too, because I know I've traveled from the Caribbean to other parts of the world, Asia and such, and it's not an easy place to get to. And I mean, you could be looking 32, 37 hours I've traveled. So
Yeah,
it's and
yeah, for
that's
sure.
just the travel, right? So
And that's just the travel, yes. And then as an inspector, you're expected to get to work.
oh, I've gotten off the airplane at 11 a.m., gone to the hotel, had a shower, and at the hangar at 1. So
Yeah,
it can be kind of brutal.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so the contract surveyors that you have, do they belong to like an agency that they work through, or are these contracted directly to the BCAA?
We have both. We have a number of independent contractors, and then we also use Bureau Veritas, based in France. We've used Bureau Veritas for probably since late 1990s, and a lot of that was because of the work that we were doing in Russia and the CIS states. So we've had a great relationship with them throughout the years, and fantastic people and very experienced people and competent inspectors that they have. So we do use them still to this day, and they are a great partner in the business and the work that we do.
So now in the more interesting part. So what about the services of the authority?
Well, we are a regulator, so we're a regulator for the island of Bermuda, and all the aviation industry that goes with that. So we have to deal with the airdrome operator and all the services that are provided here on island. Um, but we also have, of course, the aircraft registry, which is a mixture of commercial and private aircraft. Um, and in the commercial side, of course, we have AOC holders, air operator certificates. So we have a couple of small airlines here in Bermuda, and then I mentioned 83 BIS agreements. Now, those are that's a setup where you have an operator in one country and the regulators in a different jurisdiction. And we through the 83 business agreements, we are able to transfer um, some of the responsibility, or we could transfer all the responsibility as the state of registry to the state of the operator. Generally, we tend to retain all the oversight of airworthiness. So anything to do with the maintenance of the aircraft, the physical state of the aircraft, that's our responsibility. The state of the operator, of course, is responsible for all the operational side of things. So, pilots and cabin crews and training of this, of all that, and how they operate is all dealt with through their own legislation. These are bilateral agreements between countries. So they are signed at the highest level of governments, but operationally, it's the civil aviation authorities that are actually interacting on a sometimes daily basis, and making sure that the operation is done safely and inspections are being done and so forth. So the other thing, of course, part of that is storage and transition aircraft as well, which it's interesting because transition aircraft seems to have become a bit of a buzz term in the industry over the last few years. And we were scratching our heads a little bit because we're like, well, we've been doing transition aircraft for decades. But it's suddenly become a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was already part of our work. We were already dealing with transition aircraft quite regularly because a lot of leased aircraft would be coming off lease and going somewhere else. Um, and that was just part of our normal daily work. So, but we have since then we've created a more streamlined bundled package of services for transition aircraft, because something that our clients and customers were asking for was, how can we make the transition more streamlined and more efficient? Because quite often they're under a lot of pressure to get these aircraft turned around and back onto another lease somewhere, and time is money. So now we have these packages where it's a one fee for a package, and that what you get out of it. So they're not coming back to us, every other week. Oh, I need this now, or I need that now. It's all done, and everything's taken care of. So, and that's been received very well in the industry. And I think a few other jurisdictions have done similar things. Other registers have done similar things like that. So, and it ties in with the storage part of the register as well, because we do have aircraft that are physically just stored, and they have to be on a storage maintenance program and so forth.
The concept of storage, I mean, the authority's been involved in that for quite some time as well, has it not?
Yeah, yeah.
So an owner can bring an aircraft onto the register and simply put it into storage. But now, in a situation like that, are they still required to maintain the continuing airworthiness of the aircraft, or is that only when they want to again put the aircraft back into service?
That'll only be when they want to put the aircraft back in service. So when they want to get the C of A renewed. Um, if it's in storage, it just has to be on a storage program in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Um, I've seen instances where an aircraft will go into storage, and it'll be in storage for a period such that some inspection items or some component life items will come due on calendar, and the
Mm.
aircraft may be located at a facility that can accommodate the required work. Do you see that at all, or is that taken into account when an aircraft is first put into storage?
We have seen this, and it's really up to the owner of the aircraft as to how they want to handle that. They could wait until they're putting it back into service and then do the work, um, or this as part of their ongoing maintenance to keep the aircraft as close to airworthiness as possible. They may do that work prior while it's in storage. But again, we just work with the client as to what they're trying to accomplish, and come up with some reasonable solutions.
Okay. So I'm curious, as an example, if an aircraft's landing gear were coming due for overhaul while the aircraft is in storage, and the owner elects to not do it, and then when they go to put the aircraft back into service, the landing gear is now overdue. So
Mm.
how does the authority accommodate that if the landing gear can't be changed out where the aircraft currently is?
Very good question, and we will work with the client as to how they need to do that. But we can issue permits to fly if needed, special flight permits if the aircraft needs to be moved somewhere in order to get that work done. And a lot of it depends on the condition of the aircraft at the time and everything else. So there's not a straightforward answer. It's a case by case situation, really, of the overall situation with the aircraft. Um, they may be lucky that they can actually get the landing gear off where the aircraft is and have it all done before the aircraft needs to leave the storage facility. But again, we work with them in finding a way to make that all work for them.
Okay. This just kind of reminds me, I noticed in some of the brochures for the BCAA, there's a comment about basically it was to ensure success. It's I don't think the term was important, but it suggested that engaging consultants or management that is familiar with these operations and with these requirements is recommended. Is that something that the authority kind of prefers going forward? That dealing with like a management company that's familiar with what's required, as opposed to having to try to work with a client that really hasn't got a clue what they're trying to put together?
So first of all, I'm glad to hear that you've looked at our brochures. Thank you for that. But yeah, I mean, obviously, having a management company that fully understands, what needs to happen makes it a whole lot easier for everybody. It makes it easier for the owner, the operator, and for us. And there certainly are a lot of benefits to having that expertise in between, because as you say, quite often, actual owners of aircraft don't fully understand all that's required, and time is money. So trying to work through these things takes time. So yes, hiring somebody that has that knowledge and knows how to make things happen that way, absolutely, yes.
Okay. How many aircraft are on the register right now?
We're currently just over 300. I think we're around 350 at the moment. So we've had a lot of deregistrations over the last few years with the sanctions on Russia. Um, and we'll probably see a few more aircraft coming off over the next couple of years. But again, it's a good mixture of private versus commercial. Um, but again, it's still a fairly large registry. And then some of those, we've probably got about 50 of those that are in storage, actual physical storage, and then a few more that are in transition. So.
Okay.
I have a question about the registration. We saw on one of the brochure that you have VPB and VQB, if I'm not mistaken. Is there a difference between the two?
Just the letter. That's
Just
it.
a letter, okay.
Yeah. There was a point about 10 years ago, I guess, we were starting to run out of registration marks. So we had to obtain a second registration mark. So VPB was the original, and so we were given VQB as a second registration mark.
Okay.
And I'd say it actually works quite well, because sometimes, if people are buying a new aircraft, um, they they don't always want to keep the exact same registration mark, but they might like to keep the last two initials. And quite often we can accommodate that between the two different registration marks. So if it's VPBAA, you may be able to get VQBAA as well. So
Yeah, that's a good point.
So both are being used at this time then?
yes, they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to ask about who can register an aircraft.
Right. Registration of aircraft, again, can be done through our online system. And can be done very quickly most of the times, as long as all the documentation is provided at the application time, and everything's in order. We can usually turn around a registration, within a day. What we find quite often is not all the documents are provided, and we have to go back, or it could be that the registrant's waiting for another document. It could be a bill of sale or something they're still waiting for. So how long does it take? As fast as you can get us everything, that's how quickly we can work on it. So,
What about
um,
eligibility?
so eligibility, and you've probably heard similar from other registries as well. We have a number of ways you can register the aircraft. So you you can be either an individual or an incorporation in Bermuda, um, or the same if in any of the Commonwealth countries, um, and also the European Economic Area and Switzerland. And then we also currently we accept, and we've done this through a deviation to our regulation, USA and Hong Kong as well.
Another one that we ask if you have any limits on the age of the aircraft.
No, we don't.
No. Okay. Perfect.
Again, it's a case by case. We look at the aircraft itself, because you could have a 3-year-old A320 that is in horrendous condition, and you could have a 30-year-old A320 that is in pristine condition. So
Yeah.
it all depends on how it's been used and how it's been maintained.
Okay, so moving on to the regulation, you already mentioned the order and the OTARs. If we want to go a little bit more specific, how this regulation fit flight operation, worthiness, and maintenance?
A couple things about it. From an operations perspective, like what requirements would they need to meet? What pieces do they have to have in place? And also, like from a maintenance perspective as well. I mean, some authorities don't require a specific approval. Other authorities require their specific approval, or others will simply accept another organization's. And continuing airworthiness is another area where, for instance, the FAA, they don't require any specific approval. A lot of times it's the MROs that do the continuing airworthiness, or it could be an individual, right? So
Yeah. All right. So I'll start sort of at the higher level then. First of all, with the OTAR, sort of the requirement level. And there are a number of OTARs that break down all the various sections. So from the registration of an aircraft to the operation of the aircraft, the type, and again the operation is split into the type of operation. So if it's a large commercial aircraft versus a smaller commercial aircraft, or just privately operated. So there's an OTAR that deals with those, each one of those. And then, of course, we have the overall maintenance requirements is in an OTAR, and then specifically continued airworthiness is in a separate OTAR. So there's a number of OTARs which break it down, I think, quite simply for people, and very clearly. They can see what the OTAR is about. They can read the OTAR. They're not very long documents, most of them, so there's a lot of information in there that guides them through what they need. And then below the OTAR, we actually have OTACs, which are circulars, which provide you further guidance on how to meet the requirements in the OTAR. So there's an awful lot of supporting and helpful information that the users can go and get and read. And of course, we're always here to answer the emails or answer the phone and provide you with further guidance and help in understanding what's required. As I mentioned, with the private operations and the commercial operations, we do differentiate in the commercial between the large and the smaller operators. So it's more geared to the size and complexity of the operation. And with the smaller commercial operations, of course, we're giving you approval, which most of the times helps with the NCC requirements in Europe, for example. It makes it a much more simpler process if you have to apply for an NCC in Europe or in the UK. On the airworthiness side, continuing airworthiness, we do require a CAMA. And it's required for any aircraft above 2,700 kilograms. Now, for private aircraft, we also do accept like a maintenance coordinator instead of an actual full camo. So there is some leeway in there. And for example, if you already have a NEAS or UK approval for maintenance coordinator. I think in the UK it's part CAO, as an example, where they combine the maintenance and airworthiness management organization together for general aviation. So we would accept that. On your question about other civil aviation authorities approvals, yes, we do. The type certificate of aircraft, for example, we accept the FAA, Transport Canada, EASA, UK, ANAC, and also for licenses, for example, and other approvals, we do accept all of those as well. Those authorities. So if you come to us with, let's say, a maintenance organization that has an FAA approval, for example, we will accept that. If they don't, and they want to get an approval, then we can give them a Bermuda issued approval. Obviously, with that, we have to do some auditing and assessment of the organization. It may or may not require an actual audit, on-site audit. Most of the times, what we'll do, as long as all the documentation is in place, we'll give them the approval with a follow-up assessment or audit at some point, within a few months down the road. So it's not holding them up. Basically, they can get on with the work that they need to do. And just on that, also, we can do what we call one-time approvals, like for maintenance organizations. An aircraft stuck somewhere and it needs some maintenance done on it, and there's no approved maintenance provider on site, then we can work with them to organize a one-time approval for that specific job that needs to be done.
When it comes to approval, you mentioned, for example, for a maintenance organization, FAA repair station, you accept their approval. Is it an acceptance that has to go through a process of a proper approval so they get a certificate at the end, or is just a general approval? Okay.
No, they actually get a certificate. So we call it option 1 and option 2. So option 1 is you come with another authority's approval. We look at all the documentation. We say, yep, that's great, and we will issue you our option 1 approval on top of that.
Okay. Yeah. So the same thing is for continuous airworthiness management organization, I suppose. It's somebody who already have an EASA approval can go through the same thing, option 1, option 2.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question about flight operations. So external flight operations approval, are they applicable to the Bermuda? Would Bermuda accept a different flight operations approval? Or, for example, for a private aircraft, they have to apply for a private flight operations approval?
So there's a few layers to that on the operations side. One is licenses, obviously. We don't issue licenses, we validate licenses. So if you come to us with an FAA license or EASA license, we validate that in Bermuda and give you a Bermuda validation. If you're talking about aircraft flying into Bermuda, for example, we issue foreign operator permits. So anybody that's flying in from Canada or the US or UK, Europe, on commercial basis, they would need to get a flight operations permit. It's very similar to the maintenance side of things. I mean, we accept all the major CAA's approvals, and as most of it is just us validating those on our side.
Okay, so same thing for maintenance engineer; they are going to get their license validated.
Yes.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay. So with the validation of either pilot's license or maintenance engineer's license, are the privileges offered or recognized by Bermuda the same as the license that's being validated, or can you extend the privileges beyond what's being validated?
So they're validated based on what they come with.
Okay.
So whatever you're allowed to do under your EASA license or whatever, that's what you'd be allowed to do under a Bermuda license as well.
So about the addition of or the extension of authorization beyond a host approval. For instance, a 145 organization, FAA 145 organization that has Boeing 737-400 only. And they come to you and one of your clients wants them to do some maintenance on a 737-800, but it's not on the FAA approval. Is that something that can be entertained by the Bermudan Authority?
We do run into this occasionally, and we do have to work with those organizations to try and figure out a way to make that happen. And again, it goes back to this. Sometimes it's one-time approvals where, and a lot of times it depends on what the actual work is they're doing. And if it's a common, let's say a common fix that has to be done, a repair that has to be done, then we would work with them to ensure that the the license issuing organization is in agreement with that happening. It's not a straightforward thing. We can't just say, yeah, go ahead, or give them a blanket sign off on it. But we do work with the organizations to figure out a way to make that happen legally. That is.
Right, right.
Yeah.
In regard to organizations that don't have one of the primary approvals, say it's Malaysian or Chinese or whatever the case might be, but they don't hold an FAA or an EASA Transport Canada approval, um, do you issue the Bermudan approval based on one of their host approvals, or can it be one that's entirely Bermuda Authority only approval where they don't hold any other approvals?
It's done as a Bermuda approval at that point.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So with all these approvals, flight operations, camo, and maintenance, I imagine the companies have to provide a manual, whether it's an operations manual, airworthiness, or maintenance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're fully aware, manuals have to be produced for certain things, and we have to take the time to go through and make sure that everything's in there, and before we can issue any approvals and that. So yes,
Okay,
sure.
okay, okay.
So what about oversight? I mean we've just touched briefly on option one versus option two. So does the authority perform oversight on all organizations and all personnel that they issue approvals to? Is the oversight equivalent for an option one, option two?
Our underlying methodology is risk-based, right? Performance and risk-based. When it comes to aircraft, we will look at the history of the maintenance of that aircraft, for example, how it's been maintained, the organization that's maintaining it, and we will assess the risk, and we will extend the inspection intervals up to 2 years instead of every year, as an example. Similarly, with, well, I guess with the camos, if they come as an option one, there's a lot less direct oversight immediately. But we do ongoing oversight of these organizations just to make sure that everything's in order. But again, the intervals on camos and AMOs is much longer. So you're not getting us in your business and overseeing you every year. It is spread out. But again, with the private aircraft, we have that flexibility. The commercial aircraft, we still do every year. So, those that are with airlines, particularly, we will inspect those aircraft on an annual basis.
Okay. So
Yeah.
with the oversight, are we talking virtual at a distance, or is it on-site oversight?
It's a mixture, actually. So we would do some desktop stuff, where they send everything in. Occasionally, well, for example, through COVID, of course, we had to do a lot of virtual, where we would have somebody from the organization or from the camo or whatever that would actually do videos of the aircraft, let's say, and do a walkthrough with our inspectors and that. Now we still do a bit of that, but we are getting back more into the full inspecting the aircraft and inspecting the organizations in person. But again, as I said, we do some desktop stuff in between as well.
Okay, interesting. You mentioned risk-based. A lot of the decisions are made based on risk and history. With transition aircraft, typically, the way I understand it, I mean, they would come to end of lease, for instance, come onto the register. So the history would be questionable at best. I mean, it might be recorded, but there wouldn't be an intimate history of oversight by the authority. So how would something like that be approached?
Mm. Um, Records are key. I mean, the
Mhm.
better the records, the better quality the records, the easier it is for us as a regulator to assess an aircraft. So, we can actually, and this touches a bit on the export Cs of A too. If an aircraft has an export C of A from a country, that's one thing. But if it doesn't have an export C of A, then the owner of the aircraft can have an assessment done on it. What we call it's an AAR, airworthiness assessment, that's done by a CAMO, for example, who will provide us a report that yes, this aircraft does meet whatever the type certificate is. Yeah, records are challenging though if you don't have all the historical data, especially between maintenance, particularly large checks. It can be quite difficult and time consuming.
Mhm.
Are physical inspections performed on the transition aircraft?
It depends on, it's a case by case, where the aircraft is coming from, the condition it's in, the documentation that's available, and then we will assess that to decide whether we actually need to do a physical on-site inspection, or if we're satisfied with the condition of it that we've assessed through a desktop, and what's happening with the aircraft too. How long is it going to be with us? Where is it going? Um, as long as as long as we can be satisfied that the aircraft can be airworthy, then we don't have an issue of transitioning that aircraft through.
Interesting.
I have a question about applications and the exchange of documents for example, a survey, a COA renewal. Um, does the authority have a platform, an online platform where all this application goes in, or is something that happens through emails?
Yeah, so we do have an online platform where people can make their applications, whether it's for a maintenance organization or CAMO or registration, whatever. And everything's processed through that. We call it AIRS, which is the Aircraft Information and Registration System. Um, the system is aging, and we are in the process of actually replacing it. So the new system will be much more user friendly and customer focused going forward. Um, so, for example, our certificates, whilst they're electronic, they're not digital. So we're issuing an electronic document that's electronically signed, with a certified signature, and then the receiver can keep that on, let's say, an iPad or whatever they need to. But the new system, it will be digital, so everything will be kept within the system and issued through the system.
I have a question about commercial operations. So very often we see commercial operation having all the flight operations and worthiness and maintenance in-house. So they themselves provide all of this um, section of managing aircraft from within. They don't have a contractor. Let's say like this. Is this the case for a commercial operator in the registering with Bermuda? Would you like to see, does the authority want to see all of these pieces in-house?
Not necessarily. Again, it really comes down to the size and complexity of the operation. And really a lot of times the operator makes that decision because it could be more cost effective to bring it in-house, for example.
Mhm.
The bigger they get, the more complex they get. Sometimes, yes, they need to bring it in-house, but quite often they will contract out things, particularly camos. Not We do have some operators that have camos in-house, but most of them are contracted out. Maintenance, for example, is contracted out, of course. So it varies, and it does depend on the complexity and size of the operation.
Okay.
I'm curious about approvals for organizations. Some authorities only will issue approvals to organizations that have business concerns. In other words, they have aircraft that they're intended to maintain or do continuing airworthiness of. Um, but yet, some organizations seek approvals so that they can seek the business. What's the practice of Bermuda? Do you require aircraft that need to be managed in order to issue an approval, or do you issue approvals and allow the organizations to seek the aircraft?
Uh, we'll issue and allow them to seek the work. And sometimes what's happening is they're in contract talks with somebody, perhaps. So they're being proactive to get the approval in hopes of getting the contract. And a lot of times it does work out. Sometimes it doesn't. But they'll keep the approval. So, but no, they don't have to have Bermuda registered aircraft that they're overseeing in order to keep that approval.
With regards to AOC holders, now they've got to have be incorporated in the state. What about residents or any I believe that the DFT have requirements about organizations, commercial operations being resident within the territory. So is there like a special economic zone or how is that handled in Bermuda?
So we don't have a special economic zone, but as long as you have your principal place of business in Bermuda, and really that's kind of what the economic zones do, is providing a principal place of business. Um, you have to be set up in Bermuda, and you have to have your key stakeholders based in Bermuda, um, particularly the accountable manager of the AOC. Now this is quite straightforward. If it's an airline that's based here in Bermuda, obviously they have everybody here. But if it's an airline that's not doing its main business from Bermuda, they're doing it in other places in the world, um, then we make sure that there's a presence. Obviously, there has to be a principal place of business established, a company here in Bermuda with an address, um, an actual address, not just a plaque on a door somewhere. Um, and everything has to be accessible. Now, you know, decades ago, of course, you would normally go to their office and you'd open file cabinets and pull out paper and all that. People don't have that anymore. Everything's electronic. And in fact, we find we can probably do more oversight and better oversight sitting at our desk with access to their system than going to their office. Um, Obviously, we do regular assessments with the key stakeholders in their offices, but everything's electronic, which to me is far better and far safer than having file cabinets full of paper. And it's better for the operator because the operator has instant access to everything that's going on with that airline. They can see exactly where their aircraft are. They know exactly what maintenances do, what's happening with them. They can coordinate moving the aircraft if there's a maintenance issue or whatever. And so yes, principal place of business, yes, in Bermuda, and key stakeholders have to be resident here and available for us when we need them. But if they're operating in their other places around the world, they need to oversee that operation as well. So, quite often, the head of maintenance will be out, visiting other stations to make sure that they're doing their make sure they're doing their audits on them and assessing those stations and so forth. So,
So I get the sense the authority is very project based oriented. So you talk to your client, you see what the project is about, what the issues are, and you try to work with them. Now, for transition aircraft, we have talked about transition aircraft throughout the entire interview. Very often there is a ferry operator involved or multiple ferry operators. Do ferry operators require to have a specific flight operations approval?
yes. So, in fact, we have several ferry operators that are already approved by us. You don't have to use a ferry operator. I mean, you can do it yourself. Just have to get all the approvals from us. But most time, people find it's much more efficient to use a ferry operator who's got all the approvals in place. They're sourcing the pilots to to operate the aircraft and all that. So yeah, I think we've got quite a big list of our ferry operators on our website that people can go on and investigate and choose who they want.
So overseas territories, they have to follow the order and the OTARs, all of them. So is for example, a Cayman approval also I don't want to say applicable, but do you recognize a Cayman, for example, OTAR 39 continued airworthiness organization approval, or for example, a ferry operator who has a Cayman private flight operation approval, would you recognize that?
We do, yes. We do recognize, particularly the maintenance approvals. We do recognize those. So if you have a Cayman one, it's all under the OTARs, and it's exact same requirements for us. So yeah, we do recognize that.
Okay.
Do you still issue your own approval over top of that, though?
Yes, we generally will issue our own approval based on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I'm curious, is the Bermudan office, is everybody working remotely still, or is it a combination, or are they in office now?
So we've got a combination actually. Through COVID, we were of course forced to work remotely, and found that it was actually very, very productive. Um, the work still got done. We do have an office. We downsized the office after COVID, um, and we have some people that are there every day. We have some that go in a few days a week, and then we have some that will just go in periodically to the office. So um, it's funny because our organization was quite globally spread anyway, because we have an office in the UK as well. So we have a team of people in the UK. The communication actually improved being remote because everybody was on the same platform.
Oh.
When we were in office space, we would have meetings and we'd have a room full of people with a screen up with the other office connected in and be like, what we can't hear that. What did they say? It was very challenging. Whereas, on Teams and Zoom, everybody has a fair chance, an opportunity to talk and ask questions, and who's talking. You can hear them.
Right,
So
right.
it's funny how that has been actually a real enhancement for our organization. Bermuda, we've been in this business for a long, 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 long time. I mean, it started back in 1931. We've got an awful lot of experience, and in a number of areas, whether it's commercial 83 bis or commercial AOC, or corporate type of commercial or private aircraft. We've got a huge amount of experience and some highly qualified staff members as well as contractors, who are willing to spend the time with you and talk to you and help share information, and guide you through all the processes that are needed. We are a regulator, so yes, you have to fill out forms, unfortunately. Hopefully the actual paper forms are getting much, much less, and it's all done digitally. But all that really does bring a lot of efficiency to the organization, and hopefully some efficiency to our clients as well. We are always looking at our fee structure. We see that our fees are probably, I would say, some of the lowest in the industry, perhaps. Certainly competitive, and it's not always easy to decipher fees because everybody structures them slightly differently. So you do have to read the fine print in a lot of these fee structures just to make sure that you're adding up all your charges and so forth. But again, that's something that we can help you with. We can provide you some guidance on what it will cost to register an aircraft and bring it on with C of A or whatever you need to do. Flexibility, as I said, we've got people based all around the world, a number of different time zones. So we've got people ready to help wherever you need to be. And one thing we didn't talk about was how do we inspect the aircraft? We actually go to the facilities, we go to the aircraft. We'd be very pleased to have you fly to Bermuda with your aircraft and have it inspected here. It'd be wonderful. But we realize that doesn't always happen. It's not always conducive. So again, having our inspectors all around the world makes it much more cost efficient and a lot more efficient for us to get to you to do the inspections when you need it done. And we know things change. You know, the aircraft all of a sudden has to go somewhere else. Okay, we'll go meet it there now instead of, you know, over there. And I think, you know, the legal structure we have is very clear. There's, you know, very transparent. And for the most part, you know, it's quite easy to understand what is required in order to get your approvals and certifications through our process. We always try to encourage anybody to get hold of us as early as possible. Start talking to us so we can work with you to find a solution. You know, what happens quite often is the regulator is the last one to get contacted, and it's all like, "We need this aircraft tomorrow." It's like, wow. And you know, whenever we're out in the field, whenever we're doing inspections and audits, we really encourage discussion with our clients and partners out there, because we really want to impart education wherever we can, but encourage that open dialogue because it does help. You know, so often just an informal discussion will turn into, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize that." So yes, please talk to us, call us, email us, tap us on the back, whatever you got to do. We encourage that, and making sure that everything is lined up is important. We don't want people working in silos. We want the communication there, and we've done a lot of work internally in our organization on that, making sure that, you know, if flight operations get some information on an operator that's going to affect airworthiness, that airworthiness is immediately brought into the loop, so that at least they're aware of it. There may not be anything for them to do right then, but at least they're aware. And as things move along, they can be there to help and make sure that things are solved in a timely manner.
Okay, so where can people find out more about the authority and how they can reach out? Website, email, LinkedIn page?
Yep. So we have our website, which is bcaa.bm, which has a raft of information. And we also have a Facebook and LinkedIn page on each of those social media outlets. We also have a page on WeChat. So that's in the China market, the Asia Pacific and China market, for our customers and colleagues over there. So yeah, Facebook, LinkedIn, WeChat, and bcaa.bm. And our contact information for staff are on our website. Email addresses are there, phone numbers are there. So, you know, feel free to contact us. We also have a general information email, which is info@bcaa.bm. So you can always contact us through that as well. And we also issue a newsletter through our website. So if you want to receive our newsletter, please go on the website and sign up for that. And we periodically send out newsletters, usually every quarter, of things that are happening, what's going on, you know, what's going on in the regulatory world, maybe some changes coming up that our stakeholders and customers should know about. So, number of different ways.
Nice.
Or just come visit us in Bermuda, please.
Yeah.
Well, Annalisa just noticed last week the Bermuda shorts. She really didn't pick up on that.
No, I didn't.
Yes, the Bermuda shorts, which we sport when we go to conferences and events, even in Dublin in January.
That's the picture I saw. I
There
thought,
you
oh
are.
my God, oh, good for them.
Yeah, and that is traditional Bermuda dress. You know, and you dress it up or dress it down. You can put a jacket on, you can put a tie on. You know, it's that's how we go to meetings and do our work. In the wintertime, not quite as much, a little cold, but certainly in the summertime, that is the traditional dress for sure. But it is eye-catching, right? It does make us stand out from others when we're at, global events. People go, "What are you doing?
I've been at
What's
the
with the shorts?"
NBAA, and you see them coming down down the aisle. You can see them coming a mile away.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, we try to get the brightest colors. We've got to really stand
Of course.
out. So, yeah.
So, Thomas, thank you very much for your time and for all the information that you shared with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you both. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. Bye
All
now.
right. Bye-bye.